Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on. Always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And welcome in everyone to another edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krause. We thank everybody for tuning in as we move through the month of July here in 2023, fresh off of what was JDoc. I thought a great roundtable conversation on last week's show. Three great guests joined us for the full hour, and I thought the topic and the conversation was very, very relevant. By the way, in a moment, you'll tell us about your guest for today's show, another dynamic guest. But first, just a quick reflection on what last week's show was all about.
Yeah. So, Joe, last week, as you know, the Labor and Energy Show has been broadcast up the Mid-Atlantic for the last year and a half. And last week was our launch, not only of our video platform, but also of our launch across to the western part of Pennsylvania as we expand across the country. And we had Ken Broadbent, who's business manager, Steamfitters Local 449. We had Jimmy Snell, of Steamfitters Local 420. And, of course, Rob Baer, who's the president of the PA Building Trades. And it was, of course, our launch on the KDKA radio. And so it was a labor-based show. This is a labor and energy show. So we launched with a labor-based show. It was a great conversation, everything labor and energy. And I couldn't be happier with the launch. As we launch across Western PA, talked about what's going on in Pennsylvania, all the projects going on, what's not going on in Pennsylvania, and certainly a lot of the things that are happening in labor and energy.
If you missed the show last week, you can easily go to Apple or Spotify, search the Labor and Energy Show. You can download the podcast, as many people do, and listen to not only that show, but all of the shows that are archived on Apple and Spotify. Again, search the Labor and Energy Show. We're here with you, our listening audience. We remind everybody the objective and the mission of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krause is to educate the public, to change the narrative. JDoc, I think the show you've created today with your guest will educate the public for sure.
Well, it's interesting, Joe. So I read a recent opinion editor, an op-ed in a publication called The Hill, which really caught my eye. It was from a group called Centrist Democrats of America. And it detailed why Democrats should be wary of banning gas vehicles, the EV mandates. We've been talking about them around the clock. And it's not, believe it or not, it's not like related to the fact that we like electric cars. We don't. We like electric cars. I mean, who wouldn't like, the electric cars and obviously a cleaner opportunity. However, we've been talking about the mandates for quite some time. And in that op-ed, there was, it cited polling from several states where even a plurality of Democratic Biden voters don't believe that the government should be banning gas cars and trucks or prioritizing EVs, over other issues. So when I read it, immediately I wanted to know more. So we contacted centrist Democrats, and they put us in touch with the person who conducted the polling, Stefan Hankin of Lincoln Park Strategies. And so today's show is going to shine on what Americans want. Okay, and it's good. We're going to talk about opinion polls and how important and relevant they are to the upcoming elections.
Good stuff. Let's get started. This is the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krause. JDoc will get started after the break.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live,
And the big story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
All right, welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show here on our fantastic new videos platform. And I'm ecstatic to bring into the program Stefan Hankin, who's the founder and president of Lincoln Park Strategies. Stefan, how are you, sir?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me today.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I have to say, we've been I talked about the op-ed that I read in the Hill and some of the fascinating information that your company has laid out there for us in your research. Before we start, if you would, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a Democratic pollster. I started Lincoln Park Strategies in 2009 after working for a handful of different firms in the industry. Was one of the pollsters on the initial Obama campaign in 2008. And Lincoln Park Strategies works with political clients, nonprofits, issue advocacy groups, and we do some corporate work as well. And
so, we've been talking about the topic of EV mandates and a lot of what's going on. I'm a Labor Democrat and passionate about the environment, obviously passionate about our workforce. And I'm a supporter of EVs, okay? But that really isn't the issue. And we've been jumping up and down kind of in, on this broadcast, the more we've learned and dug into the issue of in a sense, the corners we're painting ourselves into. So before we get into the polling, because I found the polling that you did on this topic absolutely fascinating, and it's in a sense the results of what your polls and your research came up with is exactly what we've been saying on this broadcast. I like to talk a little bit about Lincoln Park Strategies in regards to what polling is, so our listeners understand the importance of it, okay, the objective of it, and how to utilize it. Because on this program, we don't get into rhetoric or anything like that. Our job and our goal is to educate the people. Listen, if when things make sense, they make sense. If they don't, we're just looking for common sense. So talk a little bit about Lincoln Park Strategies and talk about what you do in regards to your research and your polling.
Sure. So I'll call it the very short version is, clients hire us to figure out the landscape that they're dealing with. So, whether if it's a political campaign, we want to figure out what likely voters are thinking. If it's an issue advocacy group, let's say, typically we're going to want to look at residents of a state or an area that group is trying to understand, how to get an audience from point A to point B, right? So, for a campaign, it's pretty straightforward, right? Like they want to win. So we're there to try to figure out, what's the path to get you from where you are now to above 50%. For an issue advocacy group, it's going to be, hey, there's this issue we care passionately about. We want to try to change things in the state or in this country. What do people know about it? like, do they agree with our position, and how do we best express our position to those audiences in order to get them to support our goals.
And in this particular situation, your client was a group called Centrist Democrats of America, and they detailed a little bit. The conversation was, obviously they wanted to know what Americans thought about this particular topic, which is such a right in the center of everything. Who are Centrist Democrats of America?
Sure. So, and again, I don't work like they hired us, so I don't work there. So I might get the version slightly differently than they would say it. But my version of who they are, right? It's a group of individuals and former elected officials and people who are involved in policy and politics who take a more moderate view of issues and feel that the best way to get success is sort of from the center out. And they, in my version, right, like they take a practical approach of, okay, what are the issues, we as Democrats, as progressives agree on? How do we get the largest coalition behind those ideals and get to the shared goals? So then in last year in 2020, we started this project with a national survey because there was talk happening about electric vehicles and mandates, and and the deal had just come out that was crafted between Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia and the White House. That was probably one of the biggest surprises I think of the time I've been in politics that deal actually went through. So we started with a national survey, just like, hey, where are Americans on this, right? And the results were fascinating. And then we started to do a handful of states. We ended up doing 8 states, 3 in 2022, and then we did 5 more this year, where the state legislatures had been either moving forward gas vehicle bans or potential bans, and wanted to understand, like, how do voters in those states feel about that approach? And
I think it shows obviously that they want to know what voters are thinking, and I think it's incredibly important because a lot of the dialogue and the narrative, in many cases, in my opinion, prior to a poll like this, had not entertained that. You often wonder where the narrative is coming from. When you do a research project, first of all, obviously, when somebody retains you to do a project of this nature, research project, you're going into it obviously completely impartial, correct?
Correct. Right. Like our job. So there's no point in giving us money to tell you what you already know, and right. Just like, I mean, happy to take the check, but it's just wasting everyone's time, effort, and money, right? So people will bring us in and be like, hey, look, like we need to understand what people are thinking.
Between the eyes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so that's extremely important. Okay, that there's no vested interest. Your vested interest is in getting out the true results. Nobody wants to, if they're being honest with themselves, nobody wants to, somebody to tell them what they already know or what their position is. Reality is so important. Let's talk about when you're doing this research, talk about the process and the different processes, in regards to this particular project. What does it entail? What avenues, to do the polling?
Yeah. So, for this, whether it was national or state-based, we start out first on trying to understand, okay, what's our goal here, right? So here we're trying to understand how voters, first nationally and then in specific states, how they're feeling, right? So then we come up with a game plan for how we're going to reach the correct audience. So in this case, we looked at registered voters nationally and then in the specific states, and it's a representative sample of those voters, right? So if, I'm just making up numbers or, approximating numbers here. So if 53% of registered voters in Pennsylvania, let's say, are women, 53% of the people we talk to are going to be women. 47 are going to be men, and then we do the same for like age and ethnicity and education and all the different demographics regionally. Exactly. So again, it makes no sense for us to do a survey among it's like if we're doing a survey among electric vehicle owners about how they feel about if is it good to buy an electric vehicle. I mean, okay, that might be interesting to someone, but that's not learning what we need to learn here.
And so when you're doing, what avenues of polling? In other words, are they phone calls? Are they is it social media?
Yeah. So these are, most of these were conducted online in a handful of the states with smaller populations. So we did Delaware, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, Virginia, New Mexico, Maine, and Pennsylvania, plus the national survey. The vast majority of those are being conducted online against verified or among verified registered voters. And then in some of the smaller states, Maine, New Mexico, Delaware, we also did phone calls just because we want to make sure that we're talking to a good cross section of all the states. If in states with a big population, that's very easy to do online. Smaller states, it's not quite as good. It's just less people to reach out to. So then we also got on the phone with voters and conducted the survey that way as well. And
so how did you pick the states?
Yeah, so it mostly was based off of, at the time that we conducted the research, that there was either actual legislation moving through the state legislatures, or that, someone, and outside of my purview of I guess I don't track legislation on the state level, there was talk about something happening or something was going to come out of a committee or something like that. And typically, not every state that we did, but most states were tying back to the law that California passed, which outlaws the sale of gas vehicles starting in, I believe it's 2035. Don't know. 2033 or 2035, something around there.
Okay, and so when you're doing that, when you're doing the polling and you're getting the results, okay, with your client, and we're going to get into obviously the results of the polling, but once you come up with, you obviously, you devise a plan with the target demographics, okay, you apply the plan, you do the polling. When you get the results, are you a part of creating a campaign in regards to if your client, if that's what if that's what they're interested in, do you get involved in actually putting together a plan of attack to support the results?
I mean, we'll help. We'll provide our thinking and our hey, this is what we think, but we're not we don't have any expertise or skills in, getting messages out there. We don't make TV ads or social media ads or anything like that. So our job is we collect the data, we analyze the data, we disseminate the results to our clients, and then, we'll certainly chime in on, hey, these points are really interesting, or here's what we think are sort of the best, the best facts to come out of this data, and then it's usually someone else's job of how they're going to get that out to the public.
Right. So you'll help analyze what came in, but obviously the client is going to take those results and make their own decision on how to utilize them.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about the results. Okay. Really amazing, in a sense, shocking results compared to the narrative out there, and really, but not surprising in a common sense way. But it seems that there's some serious opposition to banning traditional cars, going into to creating the EV mandates. Talk a little bit about the results.
Sure. So I think, and you mentioned that op-ed, right? And obviously, headlines these days are designed to get a click, not to provide nuance of all the different opinions, because the headline would be 3 paragraphs long.
Right.
So I think, if I was going to sum up the results for the surveys, and this was universal, the results varied slightly from state to state, but in general, the overall picture was the same everywhere. So, American voters, very concerned about the environment. I mean, we're talking, 70, 80+% of Americans feel that it's a big deal and we need to do something about it, right? Very small group are like, in the head buried in the sand. Oh, global warming, climate change, not a thing. We're down to a very small core of people, right? And also, people broadly are supportive of EVs, right? And we saw that 60%, again, slight differences from state to state, but about 60% of voters think that they are likely to purchase an EV in the next 10 years. And for the people who said that they probably wouldn't, cost is definitely an issue. Concern about, can I get all my, the drives I need to make in and with a charge and things like that. But cost is the big driver. And ultimately what we saw, and then and this was the case even among Democrats who arguably quote unquote should be the most supportive of electric vehicles, is it's like, look, the market is headed in the right direction, right? I think we have just about every single major automotive producer saying that they're going to be fully electric by 2035, 2032. It varies from company to company, but sometime in about the next decade, almost 100% of the cars manufactured are going to be electric based on the promises that these companies are making, right? And look, they see the writing on the wall. They know it's going this way. I mean, even Saudi Arabia is trying to disinvest themselves from oil, right? So like, that's pretty much all you need to know about where we're going to be energy-wise in the next 10, 15 years. But all that being said, the idea that the government, whether it's state government or national government, would just say, no more gas vehicles, period, end of story, really rubs people the wrong way. And, and then our argument and this is our analysis on the data, is like, look, this is already a win, right? Like everything's heading in the right direction. There's no reason to derail where we're going. And if you make this a political issue, then you just have red versus blue, and we are likely to delay implementation of where we're already going. So, I understand the desire for, I'll call it, the slam dunk to just just try to end it. But it's like, look, we need to score the run in the bottom of the ninth, and 4 singles gets you that run just as well as the home run does. So if the 4 singles is the path of least resistance, let's do it.
And it's interesting because, that's exactly, our approach. Okay. In a sense, okay, let the even. So I want to clarify this. Obviously, Stefan, you represent the research. Okay, you represent the polling, and your job and your company's job is to present the results, not to have, in a sense, even though you may have an opinion personally, that's not what you're giving. You're giving the results to the research. I am going to dialogue a little bit on this because it's such it's such important research. Okay, we've been saying it for ages, and I'm in a sense talking to the listeners. Okay, and for our listeners who are just tuning in, we're talking to Stefan Hankin, who's the founder and president of Lincoln Park Strategies. Okay, and it's a conversation, about a poll in regards to mandating electric vehicles and ceasing the gas run automobiles. And so we're having that conversation because we've added a lot. This is almost like a series, and the reason is that it's important is because there's so many things tied in with electric vehicles and mandating them, and therefore the internal combustion engine being mandated out at such an early stage can impact so many different areas. So I'm going to dialogue there amongst the research that we're talking about, because this is a long overdue research project, poll. What is the reaction Have you gotten any reaction to from Washington, D.C. and the White House?
I mean, I personally have not. No one's reached out to me. The centrist Democrats, it's quite possible that they have. But, you know, I mean, so what seems to be happening is, you know, there is a distinct agreement on the goal, right? Of like, look, we want to be fully electric by, you know, the mid 2030s. And now it's just a question of how do you get there? Now, you know, and I'm not a policy expert in this, but, you know, based on dealing with the issue, you know, the state by state approaches are oftentimes not a great way to tackle an issue, just because it's like, look, so if Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland all ban the sale of gas vehicles, that doesn't mean West Virginia is, right? So if someone wants a gas vehicle, they can just cross the state line, buy it there, and then just drive it back, because no one is going to be allowed to ban the driving of a gas vehicle, as far as I understand how the Constitution works. You know, so you kind of need a national approach, and the White House has been talking about, oh, maybe we should have a national ban. But again, it's like, you know, that has rubbed unions the wrong way, and you know, and also I think we have to come to grips with the fact that the infrastructure is not there yet. And we saw this in the polling that, you know, voters are absolutely on board with the government getting involved in expanding charging stations, getting the infrastructure up so that it's easier to drive these, and you're not going to like run out of electricity, you know, halfway through your family's summer road trip. So, you know, those pieces need to happen. We also have to admit the fact that, like, you know, we're not just there with like, oh, we can just build tens of thousands of batteries every week.
We're not ready. Exactly.
Yeah, like, you know, so even if we wanted to snap our fingers and say no more gas cars tomorrow, the infrastructure is not there to support it or to build it. So you know, the time needs to be there in order for these things to happen. So, you know, looking at the data and then, you know, throwing my analysis on there, it's like, look, the government should be focused on the infrastructure, and also, you know, I mean, what the government is arguably best at is funding research into solving big problems, right? So, go. Sorry.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break because we have so much more to talk about. But your point's well made. We're going to have more from the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krause. You know, I guess Stefan Hankin, founder and president of Lincoln Park Strategies, in just a minute.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch action news live,
And the big story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
All right, welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krause. Our guest is Stefan Hankin, founder and president of Lincoln Park Strategies. Great conversation about the polling and the research in regards to electric vehicles and how, you know, and how they should be targeted and in a sense dealt with when in regards to voter the opinion of voters. Okay, and do you think? Let me ask you a question, Stefan. You mentioned that we're not ready infrastructure-wise. Clearly, we're not ready. That's the main issue. Okay, and you just can't. And a lot of people would, these mandates, in a sense, we're writing checks our bodies can't cash. Okay, and You talked about the minerals and all those, the electric, I mean, there are so many issues when you talk about, the critical minerals and things like that. I mean, from a labor standpoint, I'm talking to the listener also. I mean, we've had a number of people on the program, including Siddharth Kara. You talk about, the critical minerals being mined in the Congo, for crying out loud, with all kinds of slave labor type situations. And you can imagine how a workforce and labor reacts to that. So there's so many issues, that are dealing with this. It's a labor issue. It's an energy issue. There's so much going on. That's why I find this research so important. What did your client think of the research? Did they give you, when you present them with the research, how does that work? Okay, we've done our research. We're wrapping it up with a bow. We're sending it over, and or do you have to kind of lay it out there for them, analyze it with them, and do you get an official reaction?
Yeah, I mean, so we're there. So here's, we provide the top, what we call the top line results, right? So it's like 60% of people say they're going to buy an EV, they're likely to buy an EV in the next 10 years, right? And then, so we provide that information, but then we also come in with like, okay, here's how different demographic groups answered that question, and here's our take on what that means, right? And, so I'll say we get a sense from the client when we're presenting the data, if they're, surprised by the results, happy with the results, not so happy with the results. But, the fact that they put out, the chair of the centrist Democrats put out an op-ed citing the results, I'm going to go with that they were happy with the results and found it interesting. And again, my take on their thinking and their approach. But, what always seems to, I'll say, quote unquote, make them happy is it's like, look, is there a big issue that the entire spectrum of Democrats, progressives, and even, people more center right agree to? And, can we potentially get on the same page and move forward to solve this critical issue? So, that's like their sweet spot, and this is an issue that falls right in there.
Yeah, you think about the research, in a sense, they can use it as leverage, because now, it's possible that somebody in that group, from that group, had an opinion, and maybe they weren't getting listened to, and now they have the ability to say, okay, listen, if we're not going to listen to common sense, in a sense, or whatever their reason was, let's listen to the voters and the research, and have it tell us what is potentially going to happen. During your research, talk about. Did it seem like, the people being obviously polled were educated on the issues? Were your questions, in a sense, waking them up? Did they have strong opinions one way or the other? This topic, is it as hot button with the general public?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say yes and no, right? So everyone, just about everyone knows what an electric vehicle is, right? Like that wasn't like, we didn't have to tell them what that was. But what we also saw, and, towards the beginning of the survey, we asked, without getting into, before we even got into the topic of just sort of like, the importance of issues and what they're concerned about. And, the environment was certainly up there, right? No question about that. But then we also asked about like what the priorities of funding, right? And then priorities of funding, the purchase of electric vehicles and, and building out the infrastructure was definitively low compared to some of the bigger things like inflation and, making sure that people have good paying jobs and, that healthcare and things like that, right? Like, and that's not surprising that people say that, because yes, like electric vehicles are an issue that people understand, but if you're stacking it up against some of the other things that are going on, it doesn't quite measure up. But that's not to say that it's not an important issue. But that also goes to the importance of how the issue gets talked about, right? So if you hand some red meat to the far right with these mandates, then they can just come in, not only talk about government's big hand and telling you how to live your life, but they can say, hey, like inflation's still, higher than we want it to be. People aren't feeling great about the economy. And Democrats just want to talk about making you driving and, getting rid of your car, which is not based on truth, but like you can see the messaging that's going to come out of that side. So, part of this argument is also like, don't give them the red meat, right? Like, again, the goal is there. People agree with the goal. We're heading in the right direction. Let's not let's not snap victory from the jaws of, snack defeat from the jaws of victory.
Right. No, I got you. I know. And in essence, it seems like, that the short take of it is, of course, people, we support, EVs. We don't support mandates. Okay. Let the vehicles come into the market naturally. Okay. And we can have our cake and eat it too. All right. And let nature take its course. Now when you're talking about the issue of the EVs, what is the biggest concern? How much of a concern is expense in regard, because we talk about 60% of people, obviously seeing that they can see that they may own an electric vehicle in the next, 10 years. Were there any concerns, and was expense a concern?
Yeah, top issue, right? For people who said that there's a very little chance they would buy an EV, hands down cost, right? And I know that more and more lower cost EVs are coming onto the market, which is great, and we need that to be there. But let's be honest, there's a large portion of this country where plunking down $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 for a car is not in the family budget, right? So we need to get these things down and cheaper. And again, it's like, it's heading in that direction. And I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but, thanks to Elon Musk, look, he deserves credit for moving the market, like accelerating where we are. I think without Tesla, we wouldn't even be as close to where we are currently with the EV market. But now all the other companies are catching up, which is great. More companies making it, the more lower cost options are going to be out there. And then ultimately, that concern ideally starts going away. And, right now tax breaks are great, but that doesn't pay the down payment. That doesn't pay the monthly checks. You're out for maybe 12 months before you see any kind of benefit. It is great that they are there, but it's not solving the problem for a lot of people.
So when you did the surveys, they didn't really look into the questions of energy security or political consequences of setting policy that increases, obviously, because, China controls the supply chains, and that is, that's the understatement of the century. In other words, at this point, we're, even solar in a lot of areas. And by the way, obviously, somebody who cares about labor, that's obviously a major concern. But having said that, it didn't really, the polling didn't really, focus on the political consequences of setting the policy in regards to China-controlled, supply chains. Is that something that you think people should look into for the future?
Absolutely, right? I think, and if you look at, and like you said, we didn't test this, so this is not based on any data, the hard data I have in my hands, right? But in general, based on other projects we've worked on and seeing what information that's out there, like absolutely, right? We saw this last year when gas prices were up over $5 a gallon. That yes, some of that is just overall market supply, but then you have a group of countries that can control on the snap of their fingers of how much we're going to be paying for gas. We also know that our relationship with China is tenuous at best. So if we're relying on them for the parts, we're, relying on, mostly the Middle East for oil. It just puts us in a bad position. And, what we don't want to be is we don't want to be in the position where Europe is now, where, they don't want to buy gas from Russia because of what, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but you can't just turn that off on a dime. And, and so the less we're invested in countries that are questionable actors and we have no real sway over, the better off we're going to be from a security standpoint.
And no question about it. And that's a common sense, obviously approach and answer. Did you feel like, and I'll kind of revisit this again, people are educated and knowledgeable about, these issues, that people even understand, the average American that you interviewed, do they have, are they educated in, energy mandates and the issues that surround them, like the ones we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, no. So I think when you have, look, people are not idiots, right? So when you're talking to individuals, people, they're rational beings for the most part, have opinions, have thoughts, right? Like, could the average person tell you the ins and outs of the exact way that oil flows from Saudi Arabia to here, or, the exact, ways that mandates work, or how California actually does dictate a lot of these rules? Like, no. But, look, most people are walking around the street worrying about other things, are my kids getting a good education? Do I have the health care I need? Is my job secure? Can I pay my, my mortgage, my rent, et cetera, right? Like, there's only so much bandwidth you have in your day to worry about things. So, most people, if you could just tap into their brain and say, are they thinking about EVs as they're walking down the street? The answer is going to be definitively not. But, this is an important piece in the bigger puzzle. And, and then part of, and again, this is where I can make an argument of like, look, I don't think most people have or really should have an understanding of how the intricacies of the policy, right? But a lot of these states are tying their rules to California, and that rubs people the wrong way, even though it's kind of how it works anyways, because California is the largest, market when it comes to vehicles, and they get to set their own rules. So it's sort of like, you're going to kind of do this anyways, because as California goes, so does most of the nation, on issues like this. That's not knowledge that most of us tend to have. But, just the concept of, hey, here I am living in Pennsylvania, or here I am living in Virginia, and my elected officials are saying that we have to follow the rules of California, just doesn't sit well with most people. Right. And those are the issues, and that's why a lot of, if you look through it, we're just talking about common sense and energy. We're talking about common sense policy. Any idea where the narrative is coming from? In other words, why would we, and I know that this isn't your responsibility, but why would we be tying ourselves to an anchor in a sense, and making these, and making these really, really bold mandates, basically just simply saying by 2030, 2035, you're not going to be able to buy a gas run automobile. Okay. And that's, if you really want to educate somebody, you say that, you know what I mean? Little simple things like, and we're tied to California's, their policy. Where's the narrative coming, in a sense, from up top? Where is that mandate narrative coming from? I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to how broken our politics is, right? And, I'm old enough to remember when 70% of what you wanted was a win, right? And now it seems like we're in the world of it's either 100% or zero, right? And, you couple that with the way that, I hate being like a media basher, but, like division sells more so than broad agreement. And, I kind of mentioned it earlier, right? Like the headline of the op-ed was a little bit more salacious than the results really, I'll say really were. But nuance and subtleties doesn't get clicks, right? So it blasts out. So, what ends up happening is, you absolutely have a group of people on the left who firmly believe that 2035 or 2032 is too far away. We need to do this now, and will publicly espouse that view. And then someone will find that person and say, oh, this is what progressives think. And then on the other side, this is what conservatives think. And look, they're against each other. But it's, but most of us, we don't live in black and white world. It's shades of gray. And, on this issue, most people are on the, the EV side of the grays, and now it's just, so then it just comes down to like, look, what's more important, the goal or the path? And some people feel that the path is the most important thing to focus on, while others, and I'll put myself in this camp, and I think, in speaking for Central Democrats, it's the goal, not the exact path.
Absolutely. Well, Stefan Hankin, founder and president of Lincoln Park Strategies, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Labor and Energy Show. We really appreciate your time. Fascinating results of the poll, and I think very beneficial. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We're going to be back in just a moment.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live,
Mid-story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Good conversation. 2 good segments, JDoc, with your special guest today. A reminder to the listening audience, if you want to, or if you missed any of JDoc's interview today on the Labor and Energy Show, you can download the podcast, go to Apple or Spotify, and simply search the Labor and Energy Show. JDoc, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I'll give you the floor to just kind of put a little bit of a synopsis on what you learned today from your convo with Stefan.
First of all, we want to thank Stefan Hankin of Lincoln Park Strategies for being our guest. But what I learned was that, common sense, is what a lot of people are thinking. I mean, listen, we all care about, we've said this 1,000 times. We care about the environment. We like EVs. We support EVs. We just don't think there should be mandates, particularly when we don't have the energy infrastructure to support them. And in an all EV world, and Americans feel the same way. They are totally let the EVs come into the market naturally. People, when you talk about it, people don't understand, or whoever's creating the narrative of the mandatory mandates. Obviously, there's potentially devastating consequences to this path. Okay, losing investments in our traditional energy resources, which we still need. We can't just snap our fingers overnight. Okay, potential blackouts. Okay, with the grid going down, we don't have the infrastructure. Okay.
And by the way, I'm not so sure that the automotive companies are 100% on board of this. We started the show last week. I made reference to Ford Motor Company, billions and billions of dollars already lost on the on the EV experiment.
Yeah, they lose money all the time on them, and they're banking. Obviously, everything will even itself out, and I'm sure it will. But you talk about the critical minerals needed for the batteries. Not enough minerals available. And the environmental devastation to mine them, and the slave labor being used, and to mine them in the Congo. We've had Siddharth Kara on. Fact of the matter is, the jobs that will be lost. Listen, we can do this. We don't have to shut the faucets off and think we can do it overnight. We can't. We need common sense, and that is what Stefan Hankin's was. The results of his research and Lincoln Park Strategies results. Of the research has been, and I think we should listen to it and let nature take its course. We're still the most efficient country on the planet in regards to our work and the environment. And if we do it the right way, we can have our cake and eat it too.
The Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krause comes to a close. Again, if you want to listen or re-listen to today's broadcast, go to Apple or Spotify. Simply search the word labor and enter the words Labor and Energy Show. You can download the podcast and listen at your convenience. That's going to do it for this edition of the Labor and Energy Show. Great job by JDoc with his special guest today. JDoc, well done again. Nice job on your part. Special thanks to all of our listeners now tuning in from Western Pennsylvania, from Ohio, from West Virginia, into Harrisburg, to Philadelphia, to South Jersey, to Delaware, to Maryland, and down into DC. We thank everybody for tuning in. This is the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krause. See you next time, everybody.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live,
And the big story on Action News.
plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.